The Skarn were a race unlike any other in the galaxy, forged in the crucible of a planet where only the strongest survived. From the moment they hatched, every Skarn was taught that they were the apex predators of the universe. Their society was built on the belief that all other species existed to be hunted, conquered, or consumed. It was a brutal world, where the weak perished quickly, leaving only the most cunning and powerful to rise. This relentless pursuit of dominance had shaped them into fearsome warriors, their culture steeped in the tradition of conquest. The Skarn's reputation spread fear across countless star systems. They had carved a path of destruction through the galaxy, subjugating worlds with ruthless efficiency. To them, war was not just a necessity, it was a sport, a way to prove their superiority. Their fleets, bristling with advanced weaponry and manned by the galaxy's deadliest predators, had never known defeat. Each new world they encountered was seen as just another challenge, another trophy to be added to their growing list of conquests. When their scouts stumbled upon Earth, the Skarn saw it as little more than a backwater planet, inhabited by a weak and primitive species. The initial scans showed a world teeming with life, yet the technology level was deemed laughable. Humans, the dominant species, appeared fragile and disorganized, lacking the unity and strength that the Skarn valued above all. The reports from their reconnaissance teams only confirmed what the Skarn already believed: Earth would be an easy conquest. The Skarn leaders, hungry for a new challenge, quickly approved the invasion. The prospect of adding another world to their empire excited them. It wasn't just about resources or territory, it was about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of watching their prey scatter before them. The decision was made swiftly. Fleets were mobilized, warriors were armed, and the Skarn prepared for what they expected to be a short and decisive campaign. There was no need for complex strategies or drawn-out battles. Overwhelming force and shock tactics had always worked before. As the invasion force gathered, the Skarn reveled in their own superiority. They spoke of the coming battle as if it were a mere formality, a foregone conclusion. The generals boasted of how quickly they would bring Earth to its knees, how the human species would be crushed under the weight of Skarn power. Their confidence was absolute, born from centuries of unchallenged dominance. The fleet that set out for Earth was one of the largest the Skarn had ever assembled. Thousands of ships, each brimming with soldiers and weapons of unimaginable power, surged through the void of space, all aimed at a single, unsuspecting target. The Skarn moved with the precision of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run, no hope of escape. They were hunters, and Earth was just another hunt. As they approached the solar system, the Skarn commanders reviewed their invasion plans with cold, clinical precision. They would strike swiftly and without warning, overwhelming Earth's defenses in a matter of hours. There would be no negotiations, no attempts at communication. To the Skarn, mercy was a weakness, and the concept of coexistence was as foreign as the idea of surrender. They would descend upon Earth like a storm, and when it was over, humanity would either kneel or be exterminated. The closer they got to Earth, the more the Skarn anticipated the easy victory they were certain awaited them. Their sensors detected Earth's defenses, primitive satellites, scattered space stations, and a few small fleets of warships. It was laughable compared to the armada that bore down upon the planet. The Skarn warriors grinned in anticipation, eager to test their mettle against these so-called humans, to prove once again why they were the galaxy's greatest predators. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, the Skarn commanders gave the order to commence the invasion. The first waves of drop ships and assault craft began their descent through the atmosphere, breaking through Earth's meager defenses with ease. The Skarn could already taste victory, certain that within hours the planet would be theirs. They had seen it all before: the panic, the chaos, the futile resistance of a species that didn't yet understand the true meaning of fear. The Skarn were confident, perhaps too confident. As they began their descent, they remained blissfully unaware that Earth was unlike any world they had ever encountered. Humanity, far from being the helpless prey they imagined, was about to show them what it truly meant to face a predator. The Skarn had come expecting an easy conquest, but what they were about to experience would be a nightmare from which they could never escape. The moment the news broke that Earth was under attack from an alien force, the world was thrown into a state of shock and disbelief. It was the kind of event that people had only imagined in science fiction, now unfolding in real time with terrifying reality. Governments scrambled to assess the situation, gathering intelligence, holding emergency meetings, and activating every defense protocol they had in place. There was fear, certainly, but it was tempered by a deep resolve that ran through the core of humanity, a determination to protect their home at all costs. Military forces around the globe were placed on the highest alert. Nations that had once been divided by politics and borders suddenly found themselves united against a common enemy. The message was clear: humanity would not go down without a fight. Leaders addressed their people, calling for calm while preparing them for the reality of the situation. There was no time for panic. The world had to be ready for the inevitable battle that was coming. As the Skarn ships breached Earth's atmosphere, humanity's first real contact with an alien species turned out to be far from the peaceful encounter many had hoped for. The Skarn made their intentions clear from the start. They were here to conquer, and they expected to do so with minimal resistance. Their landing forces were swift and brutal, descending on key locations across the planet, intent on establishing a foothold before pushing forward with their full invasion. But what the Skarn didn't expect was the level of resistance they encountered almost immediately. The first wave of human forces, comprised of elite military units, engaged the invaders with a ferocity that took the Skarn by surprise. These weren't the easy targets they had encountered on other worlds. The human soldiers fought with a tenacity that defied the Skarn's expectations, employing tactics that were as brutal as they were effective. The Skarn, accustomed to overpowering their enemies with sheer force, found themselves facing an opponent that was not only prepared to fight but willing to do whatever it took to win. The initial clashes were bloody, with heavy casualties on both sides, but it quickly became clear that humanity was not going to roll over and submit. Human commanders, drawing on centuries of military strategy and experience, began to adapt their tactics to counter the Skarn's strengths. Where the Skarn expected a straightforward battle, they found themselves embroiled in a complex and chaotic conflict. Guerrilla warfare became the order of the day: hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and sabotage operations that disrupted the Skarn's plans at every turn. Human forces took full advantage of their knowledge of the terrain, using the cities, forests, and mountains to their benefit. They struck at the Skarn from unexpected angles, using unconventional methods to inflict maximum damage with minimal losses. The Skarn's advanced technology was met with human ingenuity, as soldiers found ways to counteract and even turn the Skarn's own weapons against them. The invaders were forced into a defensive posture, constantly reacting to the unpredictable and relentless human attacks. The Skarn, who had entered the conflict with an air of superiority, were now beginning to experience something they had never known before: fear. The humans were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win, and they were doing so with a level of resolve and resourcefulness that shook the Skarn to their core. The invaders had expected a swift victory, but what they were facing was a nightmare, a scenario they had never anticipated. As the battles raged on, the Skarn's losses began to mount. Their initial confidence was eroded by the harsh reality that humans were not the weak prey they had assumed. Every Skarn soldier that fell in battle was a reminder that they had underestimated their enemy, and the realization of their mistakes spread like a virus through their ranks. The humans were proving themselves to be predators in their own right, capable of striking fear into the hearts of even the most seasoned Skarn warriors. The tide of the battle was slowly but surely turning, and for the first time, the Skarn were forced to consider the possibility that they might not win this war. The humans, driven by the instinct to protect their world and their species, had shown a level of resilience and adaptability that the Skarn had never encountered before. What was meant to be an easy conquest had become a brutal and costly struggle for survival, and the Skarn were beginning to wonder if they had made a grave mistake in underestimating the predators that Earth had bred. The initial phase of the invasion had tested humanity's resolve, but what the Skarn failed to realize was that Earth's true strength lay not just in its ability to defend but in its capacity to strike back with a vengeance. As the dust settled on the early battles, human forces regrouped, not to lick their wounds, but to prepare for a counteroffensive that would catch the Skarn completely off guard. The tide of war was about to turn, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. Human commanders, drawing on every lesson from history, began to orchestrate a series of coordinated counterattacks designed to exploit the Skarn's weaknesses. Earth's varied environments, from dense urban landscapes to sprawling forests and treacherous mountains, became the perfect stage for these operations. The Skarn, who were used to fighting in more predictable settings, found themselves struggling to adapt. Human soldiers, deeply familiar with their own world, used the terrain to their advantage, launching ambushes from the shadows, setting traps in the most unexpected places, and using the environment itself as a weapon. Each counterattack was meticulously planned to inflict maximum damage with precision and efficiency. Human forces would strike hard and fast, disappearing into the landscape before the Skarn could mount a proper response. What the Skarn had perceived as chaotic and disorganized resistance was, in fact, a highly coordinated effort to destabilize and demoralize the invaders. The humans weren't just defending their territory, they were methodically dismantling the Skarn's invasion force. But it wasn't just physical warfare that turned the tide. The psychological aspect of the conflict began to play a crucial role. The Skarn, once so confident in their superiority, started to experience fear, an emotion they were unaccustomed to. Human forces used this to their advantage, employing psychological tactics that sowed confusion and panic among the Skarn ranks. Misinformation was spread, leading the Skarn to believe they were facing larger forces than they actually were. Decoys and false signals lured Skarn units into ambushes, where they were swiftly and ruthlessly eliminated. The Skarn, who had always seen themselves as the galaxy's apex predators, now found themselves constantly on edge, never knowing when or where the next attack would come. Every shadow, every whisper of movement in the dark, filled them with dread. They had come to Earth expecting to crush a weak species, but instead, they were being hunted, stalked by an enemy that was proving to be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Human ingenuity played a key role in turning the tables. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock to develop new technologies and adapt existing ones to the demands of the battlefield. Drones and unmanned vehicles were deployed to gather intelligence and strike targets with pinpoint accuracy, while cyber warfare units hacked into Skarn communications, feeding them false information and disrupting their operations. The Skarn's reliance on their superior technology was turned against them, as humans exploited every vulnerability they could find. Strategically, the humans demonstrated an adaptability that the Skarn simply couldn't match. Where the Skarn had expected to fight a conventional war, they were met with a highly unconventional one. Human forces were decentralized, making it difficult for the Skarn to deliver a decisive blow. Each unit operated with a high degree of autonomy, capable of making decisions on the fly and adapting to rapidly changing situations. This flexibility allowed human forces to stay one step ahead of the Skarn, who struggled to keep up with the fluid nature of the conflict. As the human counterattacks intensified, the Skarn began to realize the full extent of their miscalculation. They had underestimated not just the humans' will to fight, but their capacity to innovate, to adapt, and to turn the very nature of war on its head. The Skarn's losses continued to mount, and with each defeat, their morale sank lower. The tables had well and truly turned, and the predators now found themselves as the prey. What had started as a confident invasion was quickly spiraling into a desperate struggle for survival. The Skarn's commanders, who had once boasted of a swift victory, were now faced with the grim reality that they were losing this war. They could no longer deny that the humans were not just surviving, they were winning, and they were doing so with a level of ferocity and cunning that the Skarn had never encountered before. Humanity's shift from defense to offense was a turning point in the war. The Skarn, who had come to Earth expecting to conquer, were now being driven back, their forces decimated, their confidence shattered. The humans had shown that they were not just a species capable of surviving under attack, but one that could strike back with devastating effectiveness. In the end, the Skarn were left to wonder how they had so grossly underestimated their opponents, as the very species they sought to dominate proved to be the most formidable adversaries they had ever faced. The Skarn had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but the reality of the war had left them battered and reeling. The losses they sustained were far beyond anything they had anticipated, and the realization that they had grossly underestimated humanity was undeniable. The invaders, once so confident in their superiority, were now faced with a choice: continue a losing battle or retreat to preserve what remained of their forces. Reluctantly, the Skarn chose to retreat, pulling their forces back from Earth in a desperate attempt to regroup and reassess their situation. But humanity was not content with merely surviving. The wounds inflicted on Earth, the lives lost, and the destruction caused by the Skarn invasion fueled a burning desire for retribution. Humanity, having proven its resilience and strength, was not willing to let the Skarn escape unpunished. The decision was made swiftly and unanimously. The war would not end with the Skarn's retreat. Humanity would take the fight to them, to ensure that the Skarn would never threaten Earth again. Mobilization began on an unprecedented scale. Earth's united forces, now seasoned by the harsh realities of the invasion, prepared to pursue the Skarn across the stars. Fleets were assembled, and the most advanced warships humanity had ever built were launched into the void. The goal was clear: hunt down the Skarn and make them pay for their aggression. The predators who had come to Earth seeking prey were now the hunted, and humanity was determined to bring the war to their doorstep. As the human fleet pursued the retreating Skarn, the conflict expanded beyond the confines of Earth's atmosphere. The vastness of space became the new battlefield, with engagements taking place across light years of distance. Humanity's forces, now driven by a fierce resolve, engaged the Skarn in a series of brutal space battles. These battles were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, with human ships displaying a level of ferocity and tactical brilliance that left the Skarn scrambling to defend themselves. The Skarn, who had always prided themselves on their dominance in space combat, were unprepared for the sheer tenacity of the human fleet. Human ships, smaller and more agile than the massive Skarn warships, used hit-and-run tactics to devastating effect. They struck hard and fast, exploiting every weakness in the Skarn's defenses. The Skarn's once formidable fleet was slowly being picked apart, their numbers dwindling with each engagement. The humans had turned the tables completely, and now it was the Skarn who were on the defensive, fighting for their survival. As the human fleet pushed deeper into Skarn territory, the desperation of the Skarn became increasingly evident. The once proud hunters were now reduced to fleeing from the very species they had sought to subjugate. They attempted to regroup and mount a defense, but the relentless pursuit by the human fleet gave them little time to recover. Every time the Skarn tried to make a stand, they were met with overwhelming force and cunning strategies that left them reeling. The psychological impact of the relentless human assault was devastating for the Skarn. The fear that had begun to take root during the invasion of Earth now grew into full-blown panic. The Skarn, who had once seen themselves as the galaxy's apex predators, were now the ones being hunted, their territories invaded, their strongholds falling one by one. The humans showed no mercy, no hesitation, as they systematically dismantled the Skarn's defenses and pushed them further into the corners of the galaxy. The final blow came when the human fleet reached the Skarn homeworld. The Skarn had hoped to regroup and make a last stand on their own soil, but by the time the human fleet arrived, their forces were in disarray, their morale shattered. The humans launched a full-scale assault on the Skarn homeworld, a battle that would determine the fate of the war. The Skarn, despite their desperation, were no match for the human forces that had come to settle the score. In the end, the Skarn's once mighty empire crumbled under the weight of humanity's wrath. The proud hunters who had sought to dominate the galaxy were left broken, their territories overrun, their fleets destroyed. Humanity had not only survived the invasion but had turned the tide of the war, emerging as a dominant force in the galaxy. The message was clear: Earth breeds predators, not prey, and those who dared to challenge humanity would face the full might of a species that had proven itself to be the true apex predator. The Galactic Hunt, as it came to be known, marked a turning point in the history of the galaxy. Humanity had taken the war to the Skarn and had emerged victorious, leaving a lasting legacy that would be remembered for generations. The Skarn, once feared and respected, were now a cautionary tale, a reminder to all that Earth was not a world to be trifled with. The predators of Earth had claimed their place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same again. the war that had begun with the Skarn's overconfident invasion of Earth reached its final, cataclysmic conclusion on the Skarn homeworld. The Skarn, once the galaxy's most feared predators, now stood on the brink of total annihilation. Their last hope, a desperate defense of their home planet, was swiftly crushed under the relentless assault of the human fleet. The battle was fierce, but the outcome was never in doubt. Humanity, driven by the desire to end the Skarn threat once and for all, unleashed the full force of their military might. In a matter of hours, the Skarn's defenses were obliterated, their capital reduced to ruins, and their once proud empire brought to its knees. With the fall of the Skarn homeworld, the war was effectively over. Humanity had not only survived the invasion but had turned it into a decisive victory that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The Skarn, who had once viewed themselves as invincible, were now a shattered remnant of their former selves, their territories occupied, their fleets destroyed, and their people scattered. The reign of terror they had imposed on the galaxy for so long was finally at an end. In the aftermath of the final battle, humanity's place in the galaxy was irrevocably changed. No longer were humans seen as a species to be underestimated or preyed upon. They had proven themselves as a force to be reckoned with, capable of not only defending their world but also taking the fight to their enemies and emerging victorious. The galaxy, once dominated by the Skarn and other powerful empires, now had a new power to contend with, one that had shown it would not back down in the face of aggression. The reaction from other alien species was swift and varied. Some, who had long feared the Skarn's dominance, welcomed humanity's rise, seeing it as a chance for a new era of balance and cooperation in the galaxy. These species reached out to humanity, seeking alliances and partnerships, hoping to secure their own futures in this new order. Others, however, viewed humanity's ascent with trepidation, fearing that the same ferocity that had destroyed the Skarn might one day be turned against them. They watched warily from the shadows, unsure of what the future held but knowing that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Throughout the galaxy, the message was clear: Earth was not a world to be taken lightly. The species that had emerged from its harsh environments, honed by millennia of evolution and conflict, were not prey but predators in their own right. The lessons learned from the war with the Skarn resonated far and wide. Humanity was a species that would defend its own with unmatched tenacity and would not hesitate to strike back against those who threatened it. As humanity began to navigate its new role in the galaxy, there was a sense of cautious optimism. The war had been brutal, but it had also brought about a unity and purpose that had never been seen before on Earth. The people of Earth, once divided by borders and politics, had come together in the face of an existential threat and had emerged stronger for it. Now, as they looked to the stars, they did so not with fear, but with confidence, ready to explore, to learn, and to build a future among the stars. The story of the Galactic Hunt, as it came to be known, became a legend, told and retold across the galaxy. It was a story of resilience, of a species that had faced the brink of extinction and had fought back with a ferocity that had changed the course of galactic history. The Skarn, once the hunters, had been hunted to extinction, their empire reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale of hubris and the dangers of underestimating one's enemies. In the end, the war with the Skarn was not just a victory for humanity, but a defining moment that shaped the future of the galaxy. It was a reminder that in the vastness of space, survival was not just about strength, but about adaptability, unity, and the willingness to fight for what you believe in. Humanity had shown that they possessed all these qualities in abundance, and as they moved forward into this new era, they did so with the knowledge that they had earned their place among the stars. The final reflection on the war and its aftermath was one of both pride and solemnity. Humanity had proven itself to be a species that could not only survive but thrive in the face of unimaginable odds. They had shown the galaxy that Earth was a world of predators, not prey, and that those who dared to challenge them would do so at their own peril. But with this newfound power came responsibility, a responsibility to ensure that the lessons learned were not forgotten, and that the future they built was one of peace and cooperation, not of conquest and domination.